My uncle passed the rolls without looking at me and said, "Still figuring things out?" He said it the way you'd say, "Pass the salt." Automatic. Practiced. The kind of question that stopped being a question years ago and became something else. A position statement, dressed up in the clothes of small talk. I set the breadbasket down, picked up my fork, said nothing. Because that's what you do, right? You absorb it, you keep your face neutral and you let it pass through you like it doesn't leave a mark. And maybe after enough years of doing that, you start to believe it doesn't. I was 31 years old. I was sitting at my mother's kitchen table under fluorescent light that made everyone look a little tired, a little older than they were. My sister was across from me. Her husband was at the end of the table, the one they always set for guests, the chair with the good cushion. He had said almost nothing since we sat down. He was watching me. I didn't know why yet. 3 hours later, he would walk across that same kitchen, stop in front of me, and come to a full military salute. Not a joke, not a gesture, a real one. The kind that means something specific to people who've earned the right to give it. And I finally understood why I could never explain myself to my family. It wasn't because I didn't have the words. It was because the words existed in a language they'd never needed to learn. My mother kept a bulletin board in the kitchen. It was cork, framed in plastic wood grain, and it had been on that wall for as long as I could remember. She updated it the way other mothers updated photo albums, carefully, with a sense of occasion. Report cards went up there, honor roll certificates. A photo from my older brother Daniel's graduation from med school, slightly crooked, that nobody ever straightened because she liked it exactly where it was. Daniel is an emergency physician now. You say that at a gathering and a room reorganizes itself around you. People lean in. People ask follow-up questions. There's a whole choreography of respect that gets performed automatically, without anyone deciding to perform it. My younger sister Claire ran a small business. Floral arrangements, mostly weddings. It wasn't prestigious by the family's measurement system, but it was visible. You could point to it. You could show someone a photograph from a wedding where she'd done the centerpieces and say, "Claire did that," and they'd nod in a way that meant she's accounted for. Me. My section of the bulletin board had 3 things on it for about 15 years, and then one by one they yellowed and got taken down and weren't replaced. I left home at 19. I came back at 27. In between, I did something that I'm going to tell you about, but I want you to understand first what that homecoming looked like, because the gap between what I'd done and what my family saw when I walked back through the door, that gap is the whole story. I came back without a job title, without a clear answer to what do you do now. I came back quieter than I'd left, which my mother read as depression, which my father read as defeat. I had things I could have said, information that would have reframed everything. But you have to understand, by the time I came home, I was so tired of explaining myself in terms other people could receive that I'd stopped trying. I just showed up. I let them fill in the blanks, and they filled them in. My sister married Marcus when I was 24, which meant I missed the wedding. I sent a card. She kept it, which I only know because I saw it in a drawer once, years later, and something about that stopped me completely. Marcus is a naval officer. The ribbons my sister described when she first told us about him sounded abstract to me over the phone, colorful, ceremonial. I didn't have the fluency to read them. When I finally met him at a Christmas dinner a year after the wedding, he shook my hand and looked at me in that particular way some people have. Not sizing you up, exactly, but registering you. Taking stock. I didn't think much of it at the time. The family had already decided what Marcus represented, achievement in its purest, most legible form. He wore a uniform. He had a rank. He had done things that came with official documentation. When they talked about Marcus, the room did that reorganizing thing it did for Daniel, and sometimes, not cruelly, but casually, the way people drop anchors to orient themselves. Someone would turn to me while Marcus was still in the conversation and say something like, "Marcus was saying there are good opportunities in logistics. Have you looked into anything like that?" I had. I'd looked into a lot of things, but not in the way they meant. My mother's 65th birthday, that's what pulled everyone back together that November. She wanted dinner at the house. She wanted her 3 kids and their families and the extended relatives who could make the drive. She wanted the good tablecloth and Daniel's wife's pecan pie, and she wanted, I think, the feeling of everyone accounted for, everyone present, everyone okay. I drove 4 hours to be there. When I walked in, The house smelled like it always smelled: garlic and something baking and a specific kind of warmth that only exists in houses where the heat comes on too early in the fall. My mother hugged me at the door and held on for exactly the right amount of time, which is the thing about her. She loves without condition. She just expresses it in a vocabulary I'd spent years failing to translate. "You look tired," she said. "I'm okay," I said. That was the whole language we had. Daniel was already there, his kids running in circuits around the living room. He shook my hand and asked about the drive. Claire was in the kitchen adding things to things. Marcus was in the corner of the living room with my father and my uncle, holding a glass of something he wasn't really drinking, listening more than he was talking. He looked up when I walked in. That nod.
It lasted half a second longer than it needed to. I noticed it the way you notice something wrong with a tooth before it becomes a problem, just a small signal that your mind files and doesn't open yet. I told myself it was nothing. I got myself a drink and I went to find somewhere to be useful. Dinner was fine. It was mostly fine. The moment that wasn't fine came between the main course and the pie. My uncle, and the same uncle, the roles, the automatic question, was telling a story about a colleague of his who'd changed careers at 40, made it work, reinvented himself. He was using the story to be kind, I think. That's what I tell myself. He was using it as a kind of offering, a door held open. "There's no shame in starting late," he said. And he looked at me when he said it. The table didn't stop. Nobody gasped. It was so ordinary that the only person who seemed to actually hear it was me and Marcus. I didn't respond. I picked up my glass. My father cleared his throat and moved the conversation somewhere else. My mother got up to check on the pie, and I sat there and I did the math I'd been doing for 4 years. How much longer do I keep quiet about this? How much longer do I let the story they're telling about me stand unopposed? And the answer I kept coming back to was, I don't know how to tell it in a way they'll hear. I didn't have the credential. I didn't have the title. What I had was a decade of my life and a thing I'd done that didn't come with a plaque. After dinner, I stepped outside. I sat on the back porch steps in the cold, and I just let myself feel it for a minute. Not the embarrassment. I was past embarrassment. Something older and more specific than that. The particular loneliness of being surrounded by people who are genuinely trying to love you and knowing that the version of you they're loving isn't quite you. It's the shadow. It's the outline. It's the blank space on the bulletin board. I sat out there for about 5 minutes. Then I went back inside, and something had shifted. Not in the room, in me. I wasn't going to explain myself, but I was done walking around apologetically, like I owed someone an account of why I existed the way I did. I walked back in and I sat down, and when my uncle started to ask me something, I just looked at him. Steady, quiet. He asked something else. "I want to tell you what I did because the story doesn't work without it, and because I've been circling it long enough. I enlisted when I was 19. Not the Navy, Army. I was in for 6 years. I'm not going to tell you it was heroic every day because it wasn't. It was long and it was hard, and some of it was mundane and some of it wasn't. I did 2 deployments. I came home from the second one, changed in ways I didn't have words for, and I spent the next year very quietly coming apart, and then very slowly putting myself back together. When I got out, I worked for 2 years with a veterans support organization. Unpaid mostly. I drove guys to appointments. I sat in waiting rooms with people who couldn't sit in waiting rooms alone. I made phone calls on behalf of people who couldn't make phone calls. I wasn't saving lives in a hospital. I wasn't building a business. I wasn't collecting ribbons. I was just present for people who needed someone present. And when I came home to my family at 27, I didn't know how to say any of that in a way that would land the right way. I was afraid they'd make it too big or not big enough, or that I'd have to explain the parts that were hard in order to explain the parts that mattered, and I wasn't ready to do that, so I said nothing. And they said, "Still figuring things out?" And I said nothing to that too. The family didn't know I'd served. I'd told my mother once briefly. She'd received it quietly, and then we never talked about it again. She didn't know what to do with it any more than I did. The rest of them, my father, Daniel, my uncle, they didn't know. I'd never told them. It seemed for a long time like mine to keep. But Marcus knew. He'd found out through Claire, and then he'd done what military people sometimes do. He'd looked quietly at what the record said, at what I'd done and where I'd been. He'd been sitting with that knowledge for 2 years before that November dinner. He told me all of this later, standing on the porch. He said, I didn't think it was my place to say anything until it was. The evening was ending. Coats were coming off hooks in the hallway. My mother was wrapping pie in foil. Daniel's kids had reached the overtired stage of childhood where everything is either the funniest thing or the worst thing. My uncle was doing that thing people do when they're leaving, the 10-minute goodbye that keeps almost finishing. I was in the kitchen doorway, half in and half out, waiting for a natural moment to say my goodbyes. Marcus came across the room. He didn't hurry. He walked the way people walk when they have decided something. He stopped about 2 feet in front of me. The kitchen was still full of noise. Claire asking someone about Tupperware, my father saying something to Daniel, my mother's hands still moving over foil. And then Marcus straightened. His shoulders went back, his chin came up, and he saluted me. And he, full military bearing, right hand held. It wasn't theatrical. That's what I need you to understand. It was the opposite of theatrical. It was precise. The way you do something when it means something, when it has a specific weight in a specific tradition, and you are using that weight deliberately. The kitchen went quiet, not all at once. Like a sound turning down, my father's voice first, then Claire, then the rustling of foil, and they all turned. And they looked at Marcus. And then they looked at me, and I had no idea what to do with my hands. I stood there and I felt, I don't know how to describe it exactly. It wasn't triumph. I want to be honest about that because triumph would be the easy version of this story. It was something more complicated. It was the feeling of a wound being named. Not healed, named, like someone had finally pointed to the right place and said, here, that's where it is. I brought my hand up. I returned it.
My mother made a sound I'd never heard her make before. Not a word. Just a sound. Marcus dropped the salute. He looked at me and said quietly, in the voice people use when they're not performing for a room, just talking to you. You should have told them. I know, I said. You earned it, he said. And then he went to find Claire's coat. The next 20 minutes were strange, kind. My father came to me. He put his hand on my shoulder, and he stood there without talking for a long moment, which is, for him, a significant thing. My father is not a man who stands quietly. He said, eventually, I didn't know. I know you didn't, I said. He nodded. He patted my shoulder twice. He went to say goodbye to someone else. My uncle left without saying anything to me specifically, which was its own kind of statement. I don't hold it against him. It takes time to revise a story you've been telling for years, especially when you're the one who told it most confidently. My mother found me by the back door before I left. She hugged me the way she had when I arrived, except this time she held on longer. She didn't say you look tired. She didn't say anything. She just held on. And when she let go, her eyes were wet and she touched my face once, the way she used to when I was small, and she went back to her kitchen. That was all. It wasn't a resolution. It wasn't a closing of every open door. It was a beginning, which is actually harder than a resolution, because a beginning means you have to keep going. That was 14 months ago. I'm still doing the same work, still not prestigious, still not printable in the way the bulletin board required. I got a position, paid now, finally, with an organization that works with veterans transitioning back to civilian life. I'm not running it. I'm not going to be running it. That's okay. My brother called me 2 weeks after the birthday dinner. He asked about the deployments. He asked what it had been like. He asked carefully, like a person who knows he's asking about something he should have asked about a long time ago. I answered him. We talked for almost 2 hours. At the end, he said, I'm proud of you. And I said, I know. I know you would have been. The thing about Marcus, I've thought about this a lot. He didn't do anything extraordinary. He just saw the truth and he named it in the only language he had. A salute is not a complicated gesture. It's not ambiguous. It means one specific thing. I recognize what you did. I recognize what it cost. He gave that to me in a room full of people who had access to the same facts, had they ever thought to ask. They hadn't thought to ask. I'm not angry about it anymore. I'm not sure I was ever angry exactly. More like I was standing on the outside of a glass room, watching my family be warm and connected and loving, and pressing my hand against the glass, and nobody looking up to notice. Marcus looked up. I still drive past the house sometimes. My mother's kitchen light is usually on. She keeps that bulletin board up. I went in a few months ago to help her with something, and I looked at it. There was something new in what used to be my section. A small photograph, printed on regular printer paper, slightly blurry. Me in uniform. I don't know where she found it. I don't know when she put it up. I didn't say anything about it, neither did she. I just stood there in her kitchen, under the fluorescent light, and I finally knew what to do with my hands. If you're somewhere right now where the people around you don't have the language for what you've done, I'm not going to promise you it gets fixed. Some of it doesn't get fixed. Some of the years stay lost. But it gets witnessed. I can tell you that much. Eventually it gets witnessed.